crack at this and really putting in. So it's awesome to see.
It's called the Zwift effect. Once you get on, it's
Yeah,
addicting,
that's it.
and you just want to finish strong, and that's why you get in. Zoned in every day for a grand tour. It's somewhat similar for the eCrit, because every Tuesday you've got to perform to your best. How do you make sure
The Wolfpack
with Ben Simpson, Richard Cook, and Richard Gills? I also saw Daniel and Richard, is it Richard Cook? Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're teammates from the Aussie Hump Day ride. So having first and second place.
It is Richard Cook.
Being from
It
the
is
same
Richard
team.
Cook.
Yeah, so thank you. I mean, how that
ends at 107. So if they need to watch those other guys that are close on points to them. You know, got Steve Chen in 48, so he's a bit further down, so then it drops off the points. So yeah, they're going to have to watch those key riders and make sure they have one of the guys in the move. Either Ben has to be in the move or Richard Cook.
Speaking of riders to keep an eye out, Rupert Walsh, currently at the front of the affairs. I duly remember 2 or 3 weeks ago he was participating in this eCrit, and he was a minute in front of Ben Simpson on the London Classics course. He had 2 more laps to go. Suddenly, he pulls off. He legitimately jumps off the bike and has a mechanical, maybe boinked out of sugar. I mean, what could be the possible explanations to just jumping off the bike with 2 laps to go when you have a minute lead, Wes?
Yeah, we talked about this, and like it can be a number of reasons. Like I said, everyone's got a different background here. You know, he could have been a shift worker. He might have been going off to his shift. His wife might have been saying, "Look, you know, I need to get the kids to bed. I need your help." And he might have been just going like, "Well, I'm winning a race at the moment," and she'd be like, "Well, you're going to win a good slap in the head if you don't get off that bike." So you just don't understand what's going on there. So. I hope it wasn't a mechanical or something like that, because yeah, that'd be really devastating to have, you know, the Wi-Fi or internet go down or something like that. I've experienced that myself before in a KISS race. You know,
Oh
I
no!
was off the front leading, and I had dropout, and then I'm like, you know, a minute behind chasing, and it's hugely frustrating.
How did you
So
cope
yeah,
with
it'd be
that?
interesting. How did I cope? I chased and got back on, but then I'd spent so much to get back on that I think I finished third in that race. I think Troy might have been racing that race. Yeah, Troy Helfast. He's
Do you know
a
Troy?
beast of a bloke. I only know him through Zwift. Yeah, I know of him. I know who he is. But yeah, racing against him with Nadzie and my brother Bernard, like we had to full on use team tactics to beat him because he was strong. We had to use the tactics to play in to beat Troy.
While they're racing, it's hot right now. They're going through the volcano. You mentioned Bernard, your brother. What's he up to these days?
Bernie, yeah, he's slowly just getting back into riding, and he's had a bit of a break off the bike. So he's working at the moment, and just getting back into riding and getting some fitness back to try and take on these. Well, we need to give you know, this series runs through the last, so we need to give Dunn a bit of a hand there, and we need to get back into it.
Could we see a Salzburger takeover of an eCrit?
Yeah, we could get back into it, but we need certainly the watts and the power that these guys are doing. I'd want to put in some solid groundwork to be able to make sure that I'm competitive and able to help out and be a good team player.
Because, I mean, we saw Pat Shaw of Avanto ISO in the race today. Someone mentioned that
Mhm.
Joe Cooper may have made the jump as well. It wouldn't be too much of a
Mm.
stretch to see you guys jump on and give Aaron Dunn a hand.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that Cooper just before the race. I heard that via Facebook that Cooper was going to be racing, and he's a super strong time trialer. He's been New Zealand champion for the time trial before, national champion. So yeah, he's certainly a strong rider, and his tactic definitely would be to break away and hold that pace and just time trial at home. So I was really expecting that to happen when I heard that he was racing, but. I don't know, maybe like you said, they were testing the waters. Pat Shaw went off the front earlier. They were just seeing what it was all about. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see next week whether they really taper for it, like some of the other guys are doing, and take it seriously and try and win. Like Ben Hill, he had a great ride. He's off the back early and got dropped, and then was doing 10 watts a kilo and get back on and pace himself back over and just made it back on, recovered, rested, and won the race in the end. So yeah, anything can happen in a Zwift race. So it's good to see that he got up there and got the arms up in the air for the win.
You
And
know,
that's
it
one
was.
thing we should work on with the avatars. Imagine if you could throw the arms up. You
I
needed to press a little
know!
W for the W for the win and throw the arms up.
Well, I feel like you may have to write a nice little piece of letter, put it in an envelope, then stamp it to John Mayfield of Swift Long Beach office, and feel free to ship it your way and see in which direction that goes. But
See
I
what happens.
know! It'd be so cool. And then, of course, we'd see all the riders do the premature celebrations, and Swift riders would light up, and our eyes would light up.
Maybe the winner has a autopilot arms throw up in the air. So if you win, it's autopilot throw up. It's a race, so automatically the arms come up if you win. Only if you win.
Hey man, Richard Cook, I think he heard it. He's gone off the front at 7 watts per kilo. And
He's going
speaking,
for it.
speaking of that TT effort, we saw Cameron, Troy, Nazi. They do it consistently, but they never really get away due to the sheer fact that there's so many riders in the eCrit series that can cope with that sort of power. Here in the West Division, it's a bit of a different story since we only have about 20, 25 high-level Australian riders that can cope with the best. We've seen Cook, we've seen Gales, we've seen Simpson, we've seen Rupert Walsh all attack off the front and pretty much solo every week. It's been pretty much a solo effort to the finish line. So what's the secret to snapping the elastic? How do you manage to bridge away, Wes? How would you do it?
Yeah, to get that gap, obviously, like a lot of the guys are using that power up and also using that extra power up. So you got to use those to your advantage and get that gap. And the hardest thing is getting that gap and then making sure that if someone's coming across, that they're of no danger to you. So you have to work that out on the fly. Like, if someone's come across, if you're out there and you've got Richard Cook or someone coming across like this in this race, and they're obviously leading the series and are a strong contender, then you've got to think, oh well, I don't really want to drag this person away with me. Where if it's someone who's a little bit less on the radar, then you'd be more inclined to work with them and try and get away. So yeah, it's that assessing the situation and assessing it quickly, because you may only have a 5 or 10 second gap, and that can come back really quickly. So yeah, you've got to assess situation on the road and make that call quickly.
Split seconds decisions, man. Just like when you mentioned Ben Hill getting back on, that was 10 seconds of hurt for Ben, but in the end, he was the one racing the arms above. So getting in that hurt zone, it can pay off. I see Hoskins in here, another familiar face racing as well, but 10 kilometers into the race, and if we're looking from above, we can see that it's already thinned down to perhaps 7 or 8 Australian riders. We see Ciano's in there as well, who raced last week pretty well here in the Western Division. Wes, how are you feeling so far about this race? What's the temperature? What's going on right now?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we get some people starting to liven things up and attack on these little kickers and these hills and using some of those power-ups. I haven't seen too many people try and fly off the front with any of those power-ups like we saw in the last race. So it'd be interesting to see a bit of action there and just see whether the bunch thins out a little bit more. R. Cook and Walsh are sitting right up there at the front, so they're prepared and ready for anything to go. So they're at that pointy end.
I'll take a look over on SwiftPower.com because if I do remember correctly, Rupert Walsh has an FTP of about 4 watts per kilo, and he does. That is somewhat similar to Ben Simpson. All the top riders are sitting about that 4 watts per kilo FTP. So we're looking at these efforts and thinking, why are they not attacking off the front? But they've currently been averaging about 4 watts per kilo, their FTP. So you're the coach, Wes. If you've been sitting at 15 minutes at FTP at threshold power, can you attack off the front? Is that even possible?
Well, you can. You're gonna go into the red, and obviously you go over your threshold. But look, we've got someone going now over the threshold, so you're gonna go over that threshold. And then if Rupert Walsh has heard that, so he's gone out after that now. So you can ride above that threshold to lift it, and then obviously if you get that gap, then you're gonna settle back into that threshold. It's just about getting that gap and making sure that you have the right combination of people with you that you can work with that are no immediate threat to you, and you can benefit from that.
You can see the heart rate from that attack. It's just raised Rupert Walsh's heart rate. That attack raised his heart rate by about 20 beats, 15 beats. And now, being caught by Ben Simpson, he has to settle in, carry it back down, and get ready for another attack later on. They're doing 6 laps more of this volcano course, 20 kilometers more. I've got to say, Wes, personally, this is my favorite course to watch the eCrit on. As I mentioned in the earlier broadcast, anything can happen on this course. It's just awesome. What's your favorite course and why?
I've always just been a huge fan of the Watopia circuit. It's the first one that obviously I started on and got involved in Zwift. So I love those little kickers and those rollers. How you've got those 3 little rollers, and if you hit one of those with the right power up, and over those, either an aero or a featherweight through those dippers, you can get over that climb and it's downhill after that, and you can just hold on. And I've done that so many times in the Zwift Kiss races. So yeah, it's probably my favorite course for myself to race. Yeah,
the rolling terrain, utilizing it. I mean, what is the terrain like in Tasmania? Rolling as well, similar to Watopia? Do you get many volcanoes? Swift Alps?
Yeah, we've got some decent climbs though. Yeah, so we've got it's not extremely mountainous, but the roads here are hard. Like we haven't got hot mix smooth roads, and there's way less people down here. We've only got 500,000 people, so the roads are less ridden and less driven by cars. So it's really coarse, harsh bitumen, and it just feels like quicksand. So you get that really hard. We had Chris Froome come down here and train with Richie Port. And he said, I was riding with him, and he's like, man, these roads are so dead. He's like, they're so slow. He's like, we've done 2,000 something meters climbing on this Scottsdale loop. He's like, but it feels double. It's like double that. It feels so hard. So yeah, it's some really good training down here, and we've got some long climbs. We've got some lumpy little short climbs. We've got those. So like that Watopia course, we've got a lot of rolling little sort of small kicker hills around the Launceston area where I train and where the other local guys train. So yeah, it's a really good place to come down and to experience cycling here. Like we've got so many, for such a small place, we've had so many guys go through to the pro ranks. So we do punch above our weight for Tasmania, that's for sure.
Well, most definitely. Most Tasmanians, as you mentioned, are pretty strong when it comes to getting on the bike. It'd be interesting if in the eCrit we could gather some statistics to see where people are actually from in Australia, whether it's mainly located on the eastern hemisphere, eastern part of Australia, maybe some Tasmanians in there. Maybe that's something for us to look into for next week to try and get an overview of the demographics. And now, you mentioned the pack would be slimming down, and it really has. We've got Daniel Madden in that front group, who I met in Sydney. A really cool guy. We got Ben Simpson in there, who messaged us earlier before the race saying today is gonna be the day. I want to win today. And his wife raced earlier in the Eastern eCrit, so he got to watch the race unfold. Now we have to use some of that strategy from that race and implement it here today. Cook is sitting in there as well. You got Bates, Hoskin, and that's about it. So 5 riders from Australia left in the pack. Wes, we're also seeing a bunch of Norwegians, Canadians, Americans. If you are Australian right now, how do you utilize the fact that there are other riders making up the numbers that don't actually play a role in the official results?
Yeah, well, you can use that to your advantage, but obviously, it can be a disadvantage. If those guys get together and make a solid move or attack, and there's none of the Aussie key players that are up there in the points, then obviously that's when the Aussie guys are going to have to really pull their finger out and maybe even have to work together a little bit, because if they want the points and are really serious about it, they may have to actually start to work together if a threatening move goes off the front with these other foreign guys. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and whether the other foreign guys decide to light it up and attack. But they are holding a pretty solid pace, so it is going to be pretty hard for anyone to go off the front at the moment.
We saw just exactly that in the 5th West eCrit series, where it was a Japanese rider attacking off the front on the Classics course, and Richard Cook slid into the back of his wheel and just got like a moto pace. In the Tour de France or the Giro d'Italia, they've got the moto guys. It was essentially just that, slid into the back wheel and just went off into the sunset with his moto pace. And it was just great. It was just utilizing what's available, and he left Ben Simpson in the dust, and he took that victory all the way home. As we've got now, we're just about halfway through the race. We've got 33 kilometers of racing today at about 200 meters of altitude, so nothing quite serious, but those small kicks, ups and downs, they really start to feel once you get further in, as these riders have to do it at high pace again and again and again. But it looks like so far everyone is very calm, very collected, sitting at their threshold, getting ready for that fast finale. So how do you, when you're a trainer, do you still, because if you were racing in the real world, you'd have at least, 2 gels on you maybe, some water. How does nutrition come into play when you're racing the East eCrit or the Western eCrit?
When I've raced on Zwift, I've always made sure I have my sneaky gel next to me, because you never know when you might need it. A sneaky gel just next to me. I'll set up with the chair next to me to make sure I have a gel there. I have my bottle. I have a spare bottle as well. I have a sugar bottle that I make sure that if I really need a sugar hit, then I have that gel with a sugar bottle as well, with a mix. And as well, you do sweat so much, so electrolytes is key as well, because you're racing for 40 minutes to an hour, and it's a full hour of power. Like it's not easy, so you do lose a lot of fluid. So taking in fluid as much as you can while under this pressure as well, and sitting at your threshold, is important to keep that nutrition going. So I'm sure that some of the riders probably don't quite get that right to start off with, and it's a learning curve. And my brother was racing on here with no fan. He didn't have a fan. What? And he was losing. He weighed himself. He lost 3 kilos after one of the Zwift races. He weighed himself before and after, and he's like, yeah, he's eventually got himself a fan now, but yeah, like it's important to if you're taking this seriously, to step up and make sure you're well hydrated, as well as prior to the racing as well. You want to be well hydrated. You don't want to go in underdone for these things, because it's certainly tough.
You mentioned getting it wrong. I just got a heads up on the nice Zwifter phone. Daniel Madden, who was sitting well in this group, had dinner before the race, And now that dinner has resurfaced, and he's now 2 minutes off the back. So nutrition on and off the bike, it does play a massive role in the racing. So Dan Madden, if you're watching this or listening to this, right on, man. Keep trucking along. How do you recover from that, Wes?
Yeah, it's certainly something hard to come back from when you're trying to hold things down, and that comes back to preparation. He's going to learn from that and realize that he's not going to be able to smash down, dinner 10 minutes before the race is going to start. You're going to have to eat. They're actually going to have to start researching and finding out these things for themselves by trial and error. Of what works and what doesn't work. And obviously sitting up and having a roast dinner just before the race obviously isn't going to work.
If only there was like a nutrition coach they could call up at some point in fitness. It would be very convenient if there was such a coach, Wes. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a learning curve for these riders, to work out what works and what doesn't. But I am a coach, but I can give advice on those things. They could hit me up.
Wes Salzberger on Facebook. Hit Wes up if you need some advice on how not to resurface your food in the middle of an eCrit race. Rupert Walsh has gone off the front at a 2-second gap, and if that anything has told me here, if I've learned anything from the Western eCrit, it's that any gap, even 2-second gap, can just grow bigger and bigger and bigger, because there's just so few riders that are able to react to these attacks and put in efforts, because there are only 5 riders left. We essentially have a Tete de la Course, a front group, a breakaway of 5 riders now, and one of them, Rupert Walsh, has gone onto the attack at 7 watts per kilogram, but Richard Cook of the Aussie Hump Day ride is now reacting to it, as we've got about 4 laps to go, and it's all back together at the front again. But Wes, we see a first sign of life from this group now, down to only 5 Australians. It's looking good.
Yeah, Walsh is really being really committed to following these moves and making sure he's keeping around that pointy end. So he's obviously backing himself to make sure he's in this race, and he isn't that high on the points, obviously, because he's only done 2 races before. So it'd be interesting to see, whether he actually goes for a move himself to try and get away with some of these foreigners and distance himself from those other Australians.
He's got to keep it up, though. We've seen gaps start at 2 seconds, and they've been 2 seconds for about 2 or 3 laps, and suddenly that elastic just snaps, and then 2 seconds turns into a minute. And then all Rupert Walsh has to make sure is that he keeps the wife at bay, keeps the mechanicals at bay, and all he has to do is just get to the finish line. He would be my lucky horse for the rest of the day. He would be my winning betting slip. Who would you put your money on, Wes, if you had to go with a rider from Australia?
We can't go for the same one, so I'm going to have to go for Ben Simpson. He's winning the series. He's got Richard Cook there under him, so it'd be interesting to see whether, with Ben leading, whether Richard's going to be the key sort of player to position Ben up there for the finish, and make sure that he has that full opportunity to take the win.
Good call on Ben Simpson. Definitely the pre-race favorite going into this, having finished really well in all 7 races so far, entering the 8th, and he is rocking that Maratona des Dolomites eFondo kit, which you could only unlock if you took part in the first ever eFondo on Zwift. 73 kilometers, 1500 meters of altitude. It is a serious feat to achieve, and he has done just that, rocking that kit now. So we've got another 13 kilometers of racing to go, and it looks like racing has slowed down again. We're in that phase, West, where everyone is trying to reassess the situation, looking at their power-ups, looking at their heart rates. Everyone, well, they're going to wait, right? They're going to wait for the final lap right about now. Or should they attack?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see whether some of these foreigners, because they're not up on the points, they've got nothing to lose, so they're going to go out and have a crack. Where the other Australian guys, they're going to have to really work hard on focusing on saving that power for that end. They don't want to go too early. They want to save their power-ups now. If they've got the right power-up, they've got that the aero power-up. Obviously, you don't want to be using, or the featherweight, especially with that uphill finish. They want to be using any of those when they don't need it. They want to conserve that energy now. They're sitting in the bunch. They're sitting along, still moving along pretty well. That most of them are 3 to 4 watts a kilo, up towards that sort of threshold pace. So, that they're really just got to conserve now and make sure, that. And Ben Simpson just has to work out now what's happening with his teammate, whether Richard's going to work for him or whether Ben's on his own here.
I'm sure they're from the same team, from Aussie Hump Day Ride, but I think there may be a gentleman's agreement between them that, that let the best man win on the day, because we've yet to see much of a team effort from the two. They've always dueled it out on the field against each other. They may have to come together to beat Rupert Walsh and Ciano for this one. We'll see how it turns out, though, as we're hitting that incline once again. Featherweights being popped on the front as the watts per kilo go through the roof. We're seeing Ben sitting at the front weighing about 60-70 kilograms. And we've also got Ciano, Cook, all sitting in, all still together. Walsh at the back. Hoskin almost getting dropped as well. Steve Yates 2 minutes back. Racing is on now as they enter the volcano once again.
Yeah, look at the power being thrown down now. It's really strung out. Everyone's sort of battling to get in the jostling for positions now, making sure that they don't get dropped too far back here and they have to hold that wheel. Because once you lose that gap on any part of this course, you lose that gap, it really just extends out, and it's hard to get that back. You know, you lose that slipstream, and it just hits you like a wall. So yeah, really everyone's bunching back up now, but it was really stretched out there, and it'd be interesting to see whether any of these other foreigners start to have a dig now and see if they can take one of these Aussies off the front with them, and that'll make a bit of a challenge. And the dynamics of this race is really getting interesting now. It's getting to that pointy end.
In particular in the Western eCrit series, on the topic of not losing that slipstream, because there's only about 10 riders in this front group, and if you lose the slipstream, there is no coming back on, because like in an actual peloton, it's so stretched out, you can just latch on the back and then slowly make your way to the front, like in the East eCrit. But here in the Western eCrit, it's every man for themselves, since you've got to be in that perfect position. But how do you make sure you stay in that perfect position, Wes? Because that's a skill set. That's not something every rider has, you know, maintaining their position, battling with the elbows. How do you make sure to sit in that P2, P3 position?
Yeah, to make sure, yeah, and obviously you want to use that energy at the right moment. You know, now like it's starting to bunch up, so you position yourself now why it's easier. So make sure you move up through those easy periods. So if we're actually out on the bike now and not riding virtually, you know, this is bunching up here. It's downhill, so you'll see some guys start to move up the outside. So on Zwift, obviously, you know, it's that same sort of situation. It starts to go downhill and it's bunching up, then you want to move up to that second or third wheel. So then when it stretches out again, you know, you haven't got to make up that ground when the power's being put down.
Exactly, getting live inside. I hope you guys are listening, Richard, Ben, Rupert, and all the other riders out there listening right now. I hope you're listening to the live free tips you're getting out on course by Wesley Salzberger, former FDJ Orca Greenwich, now en route, and WP TAS racing on Zwift. About 10 kilometers to go. We're aiming for a finish time of about 50 minutes from these riders, as the pace is now slowed back down. Nobody really willing to take the front. We're seeing a big block of riders all across the road now. Bates now utilizing that and making his way to the front, sitting in that P2, P3 positioning and trying to maintain that. Of course, one of the main contenders, Jeffrey Creel, is not here today as he's in London getting ready for the CVR World Championships event on Zwift. So he's usually one of the guys to shake things up in the Western eCrit, but since he has won an all-expensive paid trip to London, he decided tonight I'm going to skip out on the Western eCrit and I'm going to make my way to London. So a big factor to the racing gone, but how will that affect the overall outcome of the race? He's one of the guys who are having a higher FTP, Wes.
Yeah, so having someone like that, you know, that in the mix of this race would really shake things up. Having that higher FTP and that power would really make things interesting to see what would happen. And if you got together with some of these foreigners, you know, that weren't up on the series, had nothing to lose, and you know they'd just go all out and probably stick in with that effort. And we see someone who's just going off the front here. Is this Walsh? Walsh is going for a move
again,
here.
Man.
Rupert Walsh, your man, your man that you've picked. You know, he's really putting in here. He's giving it a good dig, and you know, I can see why you've chosen him now, Jasper. And what would you think he can carry on from this and hold this gap now? It's extending out. What do you think? What do you think here?
This is the pointy end of the race. This is where it's going to matter. This is where everyone has built up that lactic acid, and this is where 3-second gap can be good enough for Rupert Wolf to actually sustain that all the way to the finish line. And you know the most crucial point of this is that he's got help. He's got Nepstad from Norway helping him. So if they can work together, that 3 seconds gap it could be enough. It all depends on how the Norwegian rider and how Ben Simpson reacts. Because Ben Simpson has been sitting back. His heart rate is about 10 off his, effort heart rate, where he can sustain that for a long period of time. So he's still resting, and it looks like he's not really respecting this attack from Rupert Walsh off the front, but it's coming back together. Wes, I really would have thought this would have worked.
Yeah, it looked like it was going out, and yeah, we've got Richard Cook up there now. He was on the front there, wasn't he? Yeah, he just come back off the front, so he's done a little bit of teamwork there and made sure that it's coming back and pacing that on there to keep that gap within striking distance. So it hasn't come back together yet, but they're making sure they're keeping tabs on that so it doesn't extend out, and they're in that striking distance to get them back. You can see the peloton now; they're just hovering behind them. So you call this hanging them out to dry in the cycling terms. So just let them hang out there to dry. They're not going to get away. They're just sort of holding them at that nice sort of leisurely distance so they can jump straight on them and probably whack over the top of them. That'll be interesting to see whether any of these other foreign riders go over the top with this move now when it comes back. The whole
This is going to be the deciding factor, Wes. If they do not come back on this incline here, I think these two riders are gone. If Ben Simpson, Cook, Ciano, and company do not bridge across, which they do just now, I thought that break would have stuck it all the way to the finish line, because it had all the ingredients. It had the strongest Australian and it had the strongest foreigner. All they had to do is take turns on the front.
Yeah, now Walsh is really hanging in there now. He's got to grab that wheel now and make sure he gets back in there, because you never write yourself off. So if he can get back in there and recover, he's quite strong, which he's just shown. So now he's just got to hang back in there. It's all fanned out here again. And looks like he's riding right there next to Ben Simpson. So he's right next to the key players here. So he's really putting himself out there that he's in for a fight here to try and take this win.
2 laps to go. 2 laps to go, Wes. Are you sticking with Mr. Ben Simpson?
I'm sticking with Ben. He's been pretty. We saw Richard Cook, wasn't? Yeah, his teammate. You saw Richard making sure that he was looked after there. So it looks like that Richard is backing Ben, working on the front there, making sure that gap stayed at that sort of distance to striking distance, so the gap didn't go out too far. So I think that he's the man, and he hasn't done any sort of bridging or moves himself or used any energy when unnecessary. And you can see him now just sitting in there, just comfy. He's towards the back of the field, but I don't think that's a disadvantage for him. He's sort of looking and playing it out, and if anyone moves, he's ready to pounce. He's slowly moving up that bunch now, using that downhill. Maybe he's listening to me. He's used that down. See how he's rolled up on that downhill? It's slightly easier now. He's rolled up on that downhill, sits third position. He must be listening to my tactics.
You know who he reminds me of? Aaron Dunn of the Wolfpack Task Team. He's got the sprint on him, and Aaron has got the positioning that if he's not working and attacking off the front and getting ready for the sprint, he's always sitting on the back. Similar to Ben.
Yep. So yeah, they must have the same sort of tactic going on there, and making sure that now that he's up there, now he needs to really make sure he stays in that sort of top 5 to sort of 6 guys there. He needs to stay up there, not be too far back now, because if anyone launches here, and like I said, those foreign guys have nothing to lose. They might go for a haymaker here and just absolutely light it up. So it'll be interesting to see whether he covers that move himself, or whether Richard Cooks gets in there and helps out and does the team roll and make sure that break doesn't go any further than striking distance.
We'll see if Ben Simpson is going to fly like a butterfly and sting like a bee in about 7 kilometers time when we get to that finish line. We've got 2 laps to go now, and funny enough, the heart rates are going down. Ben Simpson just lowered his heart rate by about 10 beats. That must mean everyone is slowing off, not willing to take the front, and getting ready for the sprint. Is that the case, Wes?
I think so, yeah. And Walsh is just sitting pretty there as well. Everyone's sort of getting a little bit of a rest here. The watts a kilo have come down a fair bit, so everyone's sort of looking after themselves here. And I think that it doesn't look like at this stage that anyone's going to take a fly. Everyone's looking happy to sit in and sort of bunch up a little bit. Simpson's going to the front now, so he's right up there in second wheel. So he's ready for anything to go. He's going to cover those moves and go with them if anything's dangerous. So that's a good tactic to be up that front range, so you're not have to do that extra power to get round people and move up. So it's good to stay up here, and everyone's got the same idea now. Everyone's bunching up together up to the front. Everyone wants to be in that second or third wheel to make sure that they can go with anything that goes up this little bit of an incline here.
You witnessed the sprint earlier, Wes. You saw Ben Hill take a magnificently timed sprint finish. How do you time that sprint? How do you work that sprint finish? Because you come in, the leaders, and you come in, you have the incline, you turn left, you have another incline, and then the finish. When is the right moment to give it everything in that sprint approach?
I think from what I'd gather, and I know Ben Hill pretty well from racing against him, and my thoughts are that he probably would have looked at he would have been counting down the kilometers to go, and then it would have been in the 400 to 500 meter range, and he would have looked at that and went, I know I can hold this effort for that long. So that's where I reckon Ben Hill's like decided, he's holding that high effort, and then he just gone and went right all out, whatever, 400 meters to go, 500 meters to go. I know I can hold that all the way through, and he's a really strong rider. So I reckon he would have gone with that, counting down, making sure that he sort of picked that range that he thought he could hold, and knew that the power that he can put out, because most of these, every one of these riders use power meters, so they know what they can their watts they can hold out on the road, so they can replicate that indoors and make sure that they can target and really pinpoint that pointy end to make sure that they can get those arms up in the air.
So it's all very much selective from you and what you can muster. It's not like 500 meters to go, bam, time to hit the rocket launcher.
Yeah, or some of the riders will be working it that way. Ben was following some other riders and almost did a little bit like the Americans would say, a shake and bake. He was following some of those riders in the slipstream and then just shot up around the outside and just launched over the top of them. So yeah, and he just held on as well. When he launched, he kept going with it. So he held that power down. He's quite a strong rider, and he is quick, but he's just as strong as he is quick. So yeah, that's why we saw Ben get up for the win today, because he is a strong rider.
Here we have the penultimate ascent of the gradient going into the volcano. 5 riders left in the front. Richard Cook of the Aussie Hump Day ride. We got Ciano, we've got Ben Simpson, Rupert Walsh, and Mr. Jono Bates. And I believe you did some reconnaissance on Jono Bates prior to the race, actually, Wes. What are we working here with Jono Bates, the X factor to the racing at hand?
So yeah, I had a little bit of look. If I've got the right person, I think he's a family man. He has a few kids, and obviously enjoys his bike riding. So he's up in here in the Zwift crew, being part of this community, and that's what it is. You've got that real community feel here, that everyone's in this together and having a good race. And like you said, the Aussie scene, everyone likes to have a good yarn afterwards. So yeah, it's a great mix of people here. We've got family-orientated people, and we've got young guys in racing. So it's a really good mix. We can see it's starting to light up and string out again here now, Jasper. Do you think your man Walsh is going to have a crack here?
Oh, most certainly. That is the bell.
There goes that cowbell. There goes that air cowbell. He really rung it there pretty hard. I heard it from here, all the way down here in Tasmania. I heard that bell ring.
Cowbell for next week, Wes. That must be my mandatory homework.
Yeah, that's your homework, Jasper. You need to get onto that.
Oh God! If only you guys could see the smile on Wes's face right now. It's almost as good as the victory will be when Rupert Walsh will take that big sprint finish over Ben Simpson coming into the finish line now. But the big guns are about to be shown, and yes, we are showing the big guns as Richard Cook is going to the front, making the pace high for his teammate Ben Simpson, who's sitting about midways in the pack now. We got 3 kilometers left to go. When do you attack? When will Rupert give it one last effort, Wes?
He's got to go for it here, and Cook is up there doing that pace making and making sure that Ben's in that pin position here. Walsh is right up the front there now, so it'll be interesting to see whether he's going to. They're expecting him to attack, so they're going to be all over it like a fat kid on a cupcake. They're going to be all over that move. So yeah, it's going to be hard for him to try and get away here with Ben having that teammate. Richard Cook is going to commit. He's showing that by riding right up the front here now. So it'd be interesting, Jasper, if your man can get up for the win. What do you reckon?
I mean, you mentioned the cupcake. We do have the chef, Mr. Cook, is in the race here. I mean, gotta keep an eye on him as they're coming into the sprint finish. I reckon it's going to be one effort, but it's a really difficult terrain to attack. You really have to do it going into the volcano, that penultimate lap. That's where you've got to use that gradient, because it's only a 5-minute effort. Most cyclists can sustain that at a high velocity. We'll see, though. I think, though, it may come down to a sprint finish or not, as Ben Simpson, would you call that? What would you call that, a shimmy? going up to 12 watts per kilo, just getting everyone else to shake their legs, see who's attentive, sitting back down and waiting. What would you call that, Wes? You are the man with the vocabulary.
Yeah, I'd say he's doing a little bit of a fakey there, a little bit of a fake attack, just to test the people, see whether he can get a bit of reaction there. So yeah, a bit of a fake attack. That's a bit of a weird tactic when he hasn't shown his colours at all yet. You know, he's really just sat back and really looked after his legs. So I don't know whether that's a little bit of nervousness there as well. We saw that with Dunn, and he attacked with 3K to go as well in the last race. So, you know, the key players of the race, you know, maybe they're getting a bit rattled of this pressure, you know. They're not used to having people commentating their races, you know. They're racing in their garages or, you know, wherever they are racing, you know, they're really having to take this extra pressure on of me and you, Jasper, commentating it. So yeah, maybe that can come into an effect to the key a little bit. What do you think on that?
Oh, definitely. Cycling is such a difficult sport physically, but then it takes it up a notch on the mental level. I mean, it's just so demanding. You've got to be in tune with your body, in tune with your mind. And I think Ben Simpson, he's gotten used to this. I think it's good. I think what he wanted to see is that who's got what it takes to react? Who's still got anything left? And I think what he saw made him quite happy because no one reacted to it. No one accelerated. Meaning, if Ben Simpson was to do that again, he would actually establish a gap because everyone else is in that hurt zone. And turning left down here, we've got the straight, and then we're about to hit the final kilometer. La Flamme Rouge, you know it very well yourself, Wes. What's going through your mind when you hit the final kilometer?
That final kilometer, yeah, it's going to be looking left to right, looking over your shoulder, making sure you're in that key position. You want to keep in that top sort of 3 to 4 wheels. You don't want to drop further back than that. And you can see that now with everyone bunching up together. Everyone wants to be in that position, that striking position. You don't want to be too far back because anything goes now. You know, you really want to jump on the back of that and use that shake and bake sort of mentality here. That's what Ben done earlier. We saw that. So it'd be interesting to see that people using those people, getting that timing wrong. So they go too early. And that can be used to the other rider's advantage. So I'd be, if I was sitting up there now, you know, and I was Ben, I'd be really making sure that I'm following. You know, Walsh will probably try and do an early fly, from my guess. What do you think, Jasper? Do you think that Walsh is going to go for an early fly here? I think he's got to.
Definitely, he's rocking that Canyon Arrow Road, nice rest and crispy. We're into the final kilometer, ladies and gentlemen. This is where it's going to be all decided now. Hitting the climb. First one to go onto the attack is John O'Bates, hitting up to 8 watts per kilogram. Rupert Walsh here on the right side, 8 watts per kilogram, 9 watts per kilogram. No separation just yet as Richard Cook is sitting just in front of Rupert Walsh. But where is Ben Simpson? He's sitting at the back with Ciano. It's still very much together and no one has launched that final sprint just yet. 400 meters now, 350. It doesn't look like today will be Ben Simpson's day as he's sitting on the back now. We got Richard Cook cooking up something special for us here in the sprint finish. Rupert Walsh was sitting on an aero power up. Ladies and gentlemen, it is all over. It's time to get out of here, Wes. That aero power up.
Look at that power up now. Wow, look at that power he's putting down. He's holding that with that power up. 7 watts per kilo, 7.2, and he's holding that consistently. I don't think anyone's
But your man is coming back though. It's close.
Oh, here we go.
Ben Simpson and Cook.
Oh, I don't think he's... Is Simpson over the... Oh, Simpson's not going to quite catch him, is he? No.
No, unfortunately. First place, we've got Mr. Rupert Walsh. No wife, no mechanical, just pure wattage. Second place is Richard Cook. Really did something special today. I think that's like 5 Michelin stars right there. Then we got Ben Simpson in third place, and I think it was Juno Bates fourth and Hoskin fifth. Wes, from all of us here at Zwift and Zwift Community Live, you rock, by the way.
Thanks, man. It was awesome being on. Thanks very much for having me. It's been great. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm sure that the people out there hopefully got a little insight into some of the racing and some tactics and tips that they could use.
And I think if all scheduling goes right, next Tuesday, the Eastern eCrit will feature the dynamic duo Jesper and Wes. So if you guys enjoyed it, let us know in the comment section below. Let us know over on the Zwift Oz page as well. We are very open to constructive criticism and also even more so praise. So thank you guys, and it's been a pleasure. Wes, do you want to say bye in Australia? How do you say goodbye and good night in Australian slang?
In Australian slang, oh, I don't know. I can't. You put me on the spot here. It's a strange thing for good night. Catch you tomorrow. That's usually what you'd say. Like
Catch you
when you with
tomorrow.
your teammates. Catch you tomorrow, mate.
It's been too easy, everyone. Catch you tomorrow.